My dad called me a failure in front of the whole family, so I showed them the deed to his house. You want to know who the failure is, Dad? I said it calmly, almost too calmly, the kind of calm that only comes from years of swallowing your words, years of biting your tongue until it bleeds, years of being the person everyone overlooks until they need something. I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila folder, the same folder I'd been carrying around for 3 months, waiting for exactly this moment. Because according to the county recorder's office, the failure is the one whose name is on this deed. And funny enough, Dad, that name is mine. The silence that followed was so thick you could have cut it with a butter knife. 23 people sat around that Thanksgiving table, and not a single one of them breathed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Marcus Whitfield. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a senior infrastructure engineer for a cloud computing firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I make $127,000 a year base, plus bonuses that usually push me to around $155,000. I drive a paid-off 2021 Honda Accord. I live in a modest 3-bedroom house that I bought with a 20% down payment, and I have a retirement account that would make most financial advisors nod approvingly. I say all of this not to brag, trust me, this isn't a bragging story, but because context matters. Because for the first 27 years of my life, every single person in my family believed I would amount to absolutely nothing. See, I'm the middle child, the invisible one. My older brother Derek was the golden boy, varsity quarterback, homecoming king, full ride to Duke University on an athletic scholarship. My younger sister Vanessa was the baby, the princess, the one who could do no wrong, the one who got her first car at 16 while I was taking the bus to my after-school job at a tire shop. And then there was me, Marcus, the quiet one, the one who got B-minuses instead of A's, who didn't play sports, who spent his weekends building computers in the garage instead of going to parties. My dad, Ronald Whitfield, is a retired auto shop manager. 61 years old, stocky build, voice like gravel in a blender. He's the kind of man who measures your worth by how loud you are in a room, how firm your handshake is, how many people know your name. He coached Derek's football team for 6 years. He went to every single one of Vanessa's dance recitals. He came to exactly one of my science fairs. One, and he spent the entire time on his phone. My mum, Patricia, is different. She's quieter, gentler. But here's the thing about quiet enablers. They're just as responsible as the loud ones. She never called me a failure. She never said I was a disappointment. But she also never stopped my dad when he did. She'd just look at the floor, press her lips together, and change the subject. "Who wants dessert?" she'd say, while I sat there with my dad's words ringing in my ears like a bell that never stops. I want you to understand what it's like growing up as the family afterthought. It's not dramatic. It's not cinematic. It's just quiet erosion. Like water dripping on a stone. You don't notice the damage until one day you look down and there's a hole where your self-worth used to be. When I was 17, I told my dad I wanted to study computer science. He laughed. Not a mean laugh, almost worse. A dismissive laugh. The kind of laugh you give a child who says they want to be an astronaut. "Computers," he said, shaking his head. "You're going to sit in a dark room clicking buttons for the rest of your life. That's your big plan?" Derek, who was home from Duke for the weekend, chuckled from the couch. Even Vanessa, who was 13 at the time, rolled her eyes. I applied to NC State on my own. Filled out the financial aid forms myself because my parents said they didn't have time to deal with all that paperwork. I got in with a partial scholarship and covered the rest with student loans, $47,200 by the time I graduated. I worked 2 jobs through college, tutoring during the week and stocking shelves at a home improvement store on weekends. I graduated with a 3.6 GPA and had a job offer before I even walked across the stage. Nobody came to my graduation. Derek had a thing. Vanessa had a dance competition. My dad said he couldn't take the day off work. My mum said she was sorry, really sorry, but she needed to drive Vanessa. I walked across that stage alone, shook the dean's hand and smiled for a photo that nobody would ever ask to see. That was the day I stopped expecting anything from them. I didn't cut them off. I didn't make a scene. I just recalibrated. I lowered the bar so far that it was underground, and I told myself that anything above that was a bonus. For the next several years, I built my life brick by brick. I paid off my student loans in 4 years by living in a studio apartment the size of a walk-in closet and eating rice and beans 4 nights a week. I got promoted twice. I switched companies for a 40% raise. I started investing. I learned about real estate. I read books about tax strategy and asset protection. While Derek was blowing through his signing bonus from a short-lived arena football career, $85,000, gone in 18 months on a leased BMW, bottle service, and a condo he couldn't afford, I was quietly, methodically building something. And here's where the house comes in. My grandparents on my dad's side, Grandpa Earl and Grandma Louise, were the only people in my family who ever really saw me. Grandpa Earl was a retired electrician, old school, hands like leather, but the kindest eyes you've ever seen. When I was 12, he taught me how to solder a circuit board. When I was 15, he gave me my first real tool set. When I was 22 and drowning in student debt, he slipped me a check for $2,000 and said, "Don't tell your father. He wouldn't understand." Grandma Louise passed away in 2019. Pancreatic cancer, fast and merciless. Grandpa Earl held on for 2 more years, but you could see the light dimming. He moved into the family house, the big colonial on Pinecrest Drive that had been in the Whitfield family for 43 years. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, quarter-acre lot in a neighborhood that had gentrified beautifully. By 2023, that house was worth $485,000. When Grandpa Earl's health started declining seriously, my dad assumed he'd inherit the house. It was understood, unspoken. The house goes to Ronald. That's just how it works. My dad even started making plans, talking about renovations, mentioning how he'd convert the basement into a man cave, telling his buddies at the shop that he was coming into some property. But here's what nobody knew. In March of 2022, Grandpa Earl called me. Not Derek, not Vanessa, not my dad. Me. He asked me to drive down to his house on a Saturday morning, and when I got there, he was sitting at the kitchen table with a lawyer, a real estate attorney named Helen Cho from a firm downtown. There were documents spread across the table, and Grandpa Earl looked at me with those kind eyes and said, "Marcus, I've been watching. I've been watching all of you, and you're the only one who ever earned anything in this family." He sold me the house, not gave, sold, for $120,000, far below market value, but legally structured as a legitimate sale with a recorded deed, proper title transfer, and a gift equity arrangement that Helen Cho had carefully designed to be bulletproof. Grandpa Earl didn't want anyone to contest it. He knew what was coming. I paid $120,000 out of my savings and investment accounts. It nearly cleaned me out, but I owned that house free and clear. The deed was recorded at the county clerk's office on April 14, 2022. I have the stamped copy. I have the title insurance. I have every single document, notarized and filed. Grandpa Earl made me promise 2 things. 1, don't tell anyone until you have to. 2, let your dad keep living there as long as he needs, but don't let him take advantage. Grandpa Earl passed away on September 8, 2022. Prostate cancer that had metastasized. I was holding his hand when he went. My dad showed up 40 minutes after the nurse called. Derek didn't come at all. Vanessa sent a text that said, "So sorry, sending love," with a heart emoji. After the funeral, my dad moved into the Pinecrest house full-time. He and my mom had been renting a place across town, and he figured, why pay rent when there's a perfectly good family house sitting empty? I didn't say anything. I let it happen. Grandpa Earl had said to let him stay, and I honored that. I didn't charge him rent. I didn't even tell him I owned it. For 2 years, my dad lived in my house, rent-free, and not once, not a single time, did he call me to say thank you for anything. Not for the fact that his housing was free. Not for the fact that I'd been the one to handle Grandpa Earl's medical bills in those final months. $14,600 out of my own pocket. Not for the fact that I'd coordinated the funeral, paid for the catering, and dealt with the estate paperwork while Derek was too busy and Vanessa was too emotional. Now, let me tell you about Derek because he's important to this story. Derek Whitfield, age 37, is what happens when a golden boy hits the real world and the real world hits back. After his arena football career fizzled out, 2 seasons, a torn ACL, and a DUI that got quietly swept under the rug, Derek bounced between jobs like a pinball. Car salesman, gym manager, entrepreneur with air quotes so thick you could see them from space. He started 3 businesses in 5 years. A custom sneaker company that sold 11 pairs, a meal prep service that lasted 4 months, and a podcast called Alpha Grindset that had 23 subscribers, 9 of which were fake accounts he'd created himself. By 2024, Derek was $68,000 in debt. Credit cards maxed out, car repossessed. He'd moved back home with my parents, meaning he was living in my house, eating food from my grandfather's kitchen, sleeping in the bedroom where I used to build circuit boards as a kid. And my dad's response to all of this? He's finding himself. Everyone has setbacks. Vanessa, meanwhile, had married a guy named Todd who worked in pharmaceutical sales and made decent money. But she'd developed a lifestyle that outpaced even his income. Instagram-perfect house, vacations to Tulum and Santorini, a leased Mercedes GLE. She and Todd were $41,000 in credit card debt, but her social media told a very different story. So there's the family portrait. Dad living rent-free in my house, Derek living rent-free in my house, Mom enabling everyone, Vanessa performing wealth she didn't have, and me, the failure, the disappointment, the quiet one clicking buttons in a dark room, sitting on $155,000 a year and a property worth nearly $500,000. And then came Thanksgiving 2024. Every year, my mum insists on a big Thanksgiving dinner at the Pinecrest house. Extended family, neighbors, the works. This year was no different. 23 people. Turkey, ham, collard greens, mac and cheese, sweet potato pie. The table was set with Grandma Louise's china, the china that nobody had bothered to preserve until I'd wrapped each piece in acid-free tissue paper and stored them properly. I arrived at 2:15 in the afternoon with my girlfriend, Adrienne. Adrienne is a physical therapist, smart, grounded, beautiful, and, this matters, she knew everything. About the house, about my family, about the folder in my bag. She'd told me, "You don't have to do this today, you can wait." And I'd said, "I know, but I'm tired of waiting." The first 2 hours were fine. Normal. My Aunt Carol told the same story about her trip to Gatlinburg that she tells every year. My cousin Terence got into a minor argument with his wife about whether the Falcons had a playoff chance. Derek was in the living room watching football, which is all Derek ever does at family gatherings. Vanessa was in the kitchen taking photos of the food for Instagram. The aesthetic, she kept saying. It's all about the aesthetic. At around 4:30, we sat down to eat. My dad stood up to say grace, and after the prayer, he decided to make a speech. This was not unusual. My dad loves speeches. He loves being the center of attention. He loves the sound of his own voice the way some people love music. "I want to thank everyone for being here," he started, holding up his glass of wine. "Family is everything. This house, this beautiful house that my father built, has been the heart of the Whitfield family for decades. And I'm proud to carry that legacy forward." I felt Adrienne's hand tighten on my knee under the table. "Now, I want to take a moment to recognize my kids," he continued. "Derek, who's going through a rough patch, but is about to launch a new business that's going to change everything." Derek nodded from across the table, looking smug despite having absolutely nothing to be smug about. "Vanessa, who's living her best life with Todd and making us all proud." Vanessa beamed. Todd looked uncomfortable, which to his credit was the appropriate response. Then he got to me. "And Marcus." He paused, took a sip of wine. "Marcus, Marcus, Marcus." The way he said my name, 3 times, like it was a punchline. You know, Marcus has always been different. He's the quiet one, the one who'd rather sit in a corner with his laptop than be part of the family. And I'll be honest, sometimes I wonder where I went wrong with you. The table went quiet, not the comfortable kind of quiet, the kind of quiet that happens right before something breaks. "I'm not trying to be mean," he continued, which is what people always say right before they're extremely mean. "But let's be real. Derek had a career, Vanessa has a beautiful family, and you, Marcus, what do you have? A job where you sit in front of a screen all day. No wife, no kids, no presents. You're 34 years old, and I still don't know what you actually do. I could feel every eye in the room on me. Aunt Carol had stopped chewing mid-bite. Cousin Terence was staring at his plate like he wished he could teleport into it. My mum was doing what she always does, looking at the floor, pressing her lips together, saying nothing. I just think, my dad said, settling back into his chair with the confidence of a man who has never been challenged in his own home, that at some point you have to stop hiding behind your little computer job and start being a real man. That's all I'm saying. Derek snorted, actually snorted, like it was funny, like watching our father publicly humiliate me at Thanksgiving dinner was entertainment. And Vanessa, sweet, Instagram-perfect Vanessa, said, "Dad's not wrong, Marcus. We just want to see you do more with your life." I looked at Adrian, she looked back at me, and I could see it in her eyes. Not anger, not pity, just this steady, unwavering certainty. She gave me the slightest nod. "You done, Dad?" I said. He blinked. "What?" I asked if you were done. Because if you're finished telling me what a failure I am in front of 23 people on Thanksgiving, I'd like to respond. He leaned back, amused. "Sure, son, go ahead. The floor is yours." That's when I reached into my bag. I pulled out the manila folder, thick, tabbed, organized with color-coded dividers because that's the kind of person I am. And I set it on the table between the turkey and the cranberry sauce. "What's that?" Derek asked. "This," I said, opening the folder, "is the deed to this house." Silence. The house we're sitting in right now. The house Dad has been living in rent-free for 2 years. The house where Derek has been crashing for the past 8 months while he finds himself. This house is mine. It's been mine since April 14th, 2022. Grandpa Earl sold it to me because, and these are his exact words, I was the only one in this family who ever earned anything. My dad's face went through about 7 different colors in 3 seconds. White, pink, red, purple, back to white. Then a shade I can only describe as fluorescent disbelief. "That's not possible," he stammered. "Dad would never—" "He did," I said. I slid the deed across the table. "Recorded at the county clerk's office. Title insurance from First American, notarized by Helen Cho Escar. You can call the county recorder's office on Monday if you want to verify, but I promise you, Dad, every word I'm saying is true." My mum finally looked up from the floor. "Marcus, why didn't you tell us?" "Because Grandpa Earl asked me not to. He wanted Dad to have a place to live. He didn't want anyone to be displaced, but he also didn't want this house to end up being Derek's crash pad or Dad's man cave or a set piece for Vanessa's Instagram. He wanted it to go to someone who would take care of it. And he chose me." Derek stood up from the table. "This is garbage. You tricked a dying old man into signing over his house." I looked at him, calm, steady. "Derek, I paid $120,000 for this house, out of my savings. Money I earned from my little computer job. The same job Dad just made fun of in front of the entire family. The transaction was reviewed by a licensed attorney, recorded with the county, and is completely legal. Grandpa Earl was of sound mind. He had his own lawyer present. Would you like to see the notarized affidavit of competency? Because it's in the folder." Derek sat down. "And while we're being honest," I continued, "let me share a few other things. Dad, in the 2 years you've lived here, the property taxes have been $6,400 per year. I've paid them. Both years. The water heater that broke in January, I paid $3,200 to replace it. The roof repair last spring, $8,900. The new HVAC system, $11,400. I have receipts for everything, every single dollar." I turned to look at Derek. "And you, Derek, in the 8 months you've lived here, you've contributed exactly $0 to any household expense. You eat the food, you use the electricity, you take 45-minute showers, and you've never once, not once, asked if you could help with anything. Not a dish, not a grocery run, not even a thank you." My dad found his voice. It was smaller than I'd ever heard it. "You had no right to keep this from us." "I had every right," I said. "It's my house. My name is on the deed. My money paid for it. And I kept it private because I knew that the moment this family found out, it would become about what they could take from me. Just like it's always been." Aunt Carol whispered, "Oh my Lord." Cousin Terence muttered something that sounded like "saw that coming." Todd was staring at Vanessa with an expression that suggested several very uncomfortable car rides home in his future. So here's what's going to happen, I said. I'm not kicking anyone out tonight. It's Thanksgiving. We're going to finish this meal like adults. But starting December 1st, things are going to change. If you want to continue living in this house, Dad, we're going to have a conversation about a formal lease agreement. Fair market rent for a house like this is about $2,400 a month. I'm not going to charge you that, but I am going to charge you something because I'm done subsidizing a man who calls me a failure. And Derek. I looked at my brother. You have until January 31st to find your own place. I'll help you. I'll even give you first and last month's rent as a gift, but the free ride is over. I closed the folder. Any questions? There were no questions. The rest of Thanksgiving dinner was the quietest meal in Whitfield family history. People ate with their heads down. Forks clinked against plates. The only sounds were chewing and the occasional clearing of a throat. Adrienne squeezed my hand under the table, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I didn't feel invisible. I wish I could tell you that was the end of it. That my family took a hard look at themselves, reflected on their behavior, and came to me with genuine apologies. But this is real life, and in real life, people don't change overnight. Especially people who've spent decades building a reality that centers them and marginalizes everyone else. The first call came at 7:38 a.m., the day after Thanksgiving. It was Derek. You need to sign the house over to Dad, he said. No hello, no preamble, just that. Good morning to you too, Derek. I'm serious, Marcus. That house belongs to our family. You had no right to buy it behind everyone's back. Grandpa Earl was sick. He wasn't thinking straight. He was thinking straighter than anyone else in this family, I said, and I'm not signing anything over to anyone. The conversation is closed. He hung up on me. The second call came 40 minutes later. My mom. Marcus, honey, your father is very upset. Her voice had that particular quality, the soothing, placating, everything will be fine if you just give in tone that I'd been hearing my entire life. Can't you just put his name on the house, for peace? He's your father. Mom, he called me a failure in front of 23 people last night, on Thanksgiving, in my own house. And your response is to ask me to put his name on the deed. Silence. Then, he didn't mean it like that. He meant it exactly like that. He's meant it exactly like that for 34 years. She started crying, soft, careful crying, the kind designed to make you feel guilty without directly accusing you of anything. I'd seen this performance 1,000 times. I loved my mother, but I was done being manipulated by tears. Mom, I love you, but I'm not putting Dad's name on my house. And I think you know deep down that Grandpa Earl made the right choice. She hung up, not angrily, sadly, which was somehow worse. By Saturday evening, the full Whitfield family information network had been activated. If you've ever been part of a large family, you know what I mean. It's like a telephone game, except instead of a whispered phrase getting garbled, it's your entire life story getting distorted and weaponized. Aunt Carol called my cousin Janine, who called her mother-in-law, who called my Uncle Bernard, who called my dad, who told everyone that I had stolen the house from a dying man and was now throwing his own father out on the street. By Sunday morning, I had 17 missed calls, 12 text messages, and a Facebook message from a second cousin I hadn't spoken to in 11 years telling me I should be ashamed of myself. I didn't respond to any of them. On Monday, I got a call from Helen Cho. My dad had gone to her office. He'd walked in without an appointment, demanded to see the paperwork, and told her that the sale was fraudulent and he intended to have it reversed. I explained to him that the transaction was entirely legal, Helen told me, her voice carrying the particular patience of a lawyer who has dealt with this exact scenario before. I showed him the deed, the transfer documents, the affidavit of competency, and the title insurance policy. He asked if he could contest it. I told him he could try, but that the documentation was comprehensive. Earl was of sound mind at the time of the sale, and the price, while below market, was within the range of a legitimate gift equity transaction. How did he take it? He left without saying goodbye and slammed the door hard enough to crack the frame. I'm sending you a bill for the frame repair. I laughed. For the first time in days, I actually laughed. But my dad wasn't done. not even close. On December 3rd, I received a certified letter from a lawyer named Greg Fulton. My dad had retained counsel. The letter claimed that the sale of the Pinecrest property was executed under undue influence upon an elderly, infirm individual, and demanded that I voluntarily reconvey the property to Ronald Whitfield within 30 days or face legal action. I called Helen Cho. She read the letter, sighed the sigh of a woman who has seen every flavor of family greed, and said, "This is a bluff. The documentation is ironclad. Earl had his own attorney present at the signing. That was me, and I can testify to his competency." Additionally, the competency affidavit was supported by a letter from Earl's physician confirming his cognitive function at the time. Greg Fulton knows this case has no legs. He's hoping you'll fold. I'm not folding. I didn't think you would. I'll draft a response. Helen's response was 4 pages of the most politely devastating legal prose I've ever read. She cited case law. She attached the competency affidavit, the physician's letter, the title insurance policy, and a timeline of the transaction with every date, signature, and notarization catalogued. The final paragraph stated that any further baseless claims would be met with a motion for sanctions and a counterclaim for harassment. We never heard from Greg Fulton again, but my dad escalated in other ways. The weekend of December 7th, he changed the locks on the Pinecrest house. My house. He changed the locks on my house. I found out because a neighbor, sweet Mrs. Patterson, who'd lived next door for 30 years and had always sent me birthday cards even when my own family forgot, called me to say she'd seen a locksmith's van in the driveway. I drove to Pinecrest on a Sunday morning. Knocked on the door. My dad opened it with the particular expression of a man who thinks he's won. "Changed the locks," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "My house, my locks." "Your house?" I said. "Dad, I have the deed. I have the title. I have the recorded transfer. This is legally, documentarily, and factually my house. Changing the locks doesn't change ownership. It just means I need to call a locksmith." "Try it," he said, and he closed the door in my face. So I tried it. I called Helen Cho on Monday morning. By Wednesday, we had filed a motion for an emergency order requiring my dad to provide me with keys to my own property. The judge reviewed the deed, the title, and the transfer documents and issued the order the same day. A county sheriff's deputy delivered the order to my dad on Thursday at 3:17 in the afternoon. I know the exact time because the deputy texted me a photo of the signed receipt of service. My dad had new keys made and delivered to me by Friday. He didn't say a word. But he did something else. Something that, even by Whitfield family standards, was a new low. He started calling family members and telling them that I was planning to sell the house to a developer. That I was going to tear down Grandpa Earl's house, the family legacy, and pocket the cash. This was, of course, a complete fabrication. I had zero intention of selling the house. But the story spread like gasoline on a brush fire. My phone blew up. Aunt Carol left a voicemail that started with "Marcus, how could you?" and ended with her crying. Uncle Bernard sent a text that just said, "Your grandfather is rolling in his grave." Cousin Terence, the only family member who'd seemed even slightly on my side, called me and said, "Look, man, I don't believe the rumors, but you might want to get ahead of this." So I did. I wrote a letter, not an email, not a text, a letter. Printed on good paper, signed by hand, mailed to every single member of the Whitfield extended family. 47 letters. I spent $62.40 on stamps. The letter was simple. It explained the timeline. When Grandpa Earl approached me, when the sale occurred, how much I paid, what documentation existed, and what my intentions were for the house. I included copies of the deed and the competency affidavit. I stated clearly that I had no plans to sell the property and that I had been paying all taxes, maintenance, and improvements since the purchase. I stated that my father had been living in the house rent-free for over 2 years and that I had never asked for a dollar. And at the end, I wrote, "I loved Grandpa Earl. He was the only person in this family who ever made me feel like I was enough. He trusted me with this house because he knew I would protect it. And I will. But I will not be bullied, lied about, or manipulated into giving away what he chose to leave with me. If you have questions, my door is open. If you've already made up your mind, I respect that, but I won't apologize for the truth. The response was immediate and divided. About half the family sided with me once they saw the documentation. The other half, mostly people who either owed my dad favors or were too enmeshed in the family hierarchy to think independently, continued to insist that I'd manipulated a sick old man. But here's the thing about documentation. It doesn't care about feelings. It doesn't care about family politics. It just sits there, being true, whether people like it or not. By mid-December, Derek's behavior had escalated beyond anything I'd anticipated. He started posting on social media long, rambling Facebook rants about how I'd betrayed the family and stolen our inheritance. He tagged me in every post. He tagged Adrienne. He even tagged my employer's corporate page, which, and I cannot stress this enough, was spectacularly stupid. My HR department contacted me. They were very professional about it. They'd seen the posts, they weren't concerned about my employment, but they wanted to make sure I was okay, and to let me know that they had flagged the posts as potential harassment. I called Derek. He didn't answer, so I texted him. Derek, you have two choices. You take down every post by midnight tonight, or I file a harassment complaint and a defamation suit in the morning. This is not a negotiation. He texted back. LOL, good luck, bro. At 8 a.m., the next morning, Helen Cho filed a cease and desist. By noon, she had also filed a defamation complaint in small claims court, documenting the specific false statements Derek had made, that I had stolen the house, that Grandpa Earl was not in his right mind, and that I was planning to sell the property. Each claim was demonstrably false, and Derek had published them to a public audience. Derek took the posts down by 3 that afternoon. He also blocked me on every social media platform, which honestly was the best gift he'd ever given me. Christmas that year was small, just me and Adrienne at my house in Charlotte. We cooked a roast chicken, we watched old movies, we exchanged gifts. She gave me a framed photo of Grandpa Earl and me at my college graduation party, a small gathering he'd thrown for me at his house because nobody else had bothered. In the photo, he's got his arm around my shoulders, and we're both laughing. I didn't even know the photo existed. She'd found it in a box of old pictures when we'd been cleaning out a closet at Pinecrest. I cried. Not the dramatic, movie-style crying, just quiet tears that come when you realize someone loved you more than you understood at the time. In January, I had the conversation with my dad about the lease. I drove to Pinecrest on a Saturday afternoon. My mum was there. Derek had moved out 3 days earlier. He'd found a room in a shared house across town, which he was paying for with money from a new job at a logistics warehouse. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and for the first time in years, he was actually earning his own way. I sat down at the kitchen table, Grandpa Earl's kitchen table, and laid it out. I'm not charging you market rate, I said. The fair rent for this house is around $2,400. I'm asking for $800 a month. That covers the property taxes and a portion of maintenance. It's below market by a mile, and you know it. My dad stared at the table. His jaw was tight. His hands were folded. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Your grandfather, he said slowly, should have left this house to me. Maybe, I said. But he didn't. He left it to the person he trusted. And whether you agree with his choice or not, it's done. The question now is, do you want to live here or don't you? My mom put her hand on my dad's arm. Ron, she said, just his name, but there was a weight to it. He looked at her, then at me, then at the table. $800 a month, he said. $800 a month, I confirmed, and I'll put it in writing so we're both protected. He nodded. Once, a single grudging nod. I drew up a simple lease agreement. Helen Cho reviewed it. My parents signed it on February 1st. The first rent check arrived on February 3rd. It was the first time my father had ever given me money for anything. Over the next few months, something shifted. Not dramatically, there was no tearful reconciliation, no Hallmark movie moment. But the dynamic changed. My dad stopped making comments about my job. He stopped comparing me to Derek. When I came to visit, he'd ask about my work, awkwardly, clumsily, like a man learning a language he'd refused to study for 3 decades. But he asked. One evening in April, I was fixing a leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom, the same bathroom where Grandpa Earl had taught me how to replace a washer when I was 9. My dad appeared in the doorway. He stood there for a long moment, watching me work. "Your grandfather taught you that," he said. "Yeah," I said. "He did." Another long pause. Then, "He taught you a lot of things I should have taught you." I stopped tightening the wrench. I looked up at my dad. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the faucet, at my hands, at the tools spread on the bathroom floor. "Yeah," I said again, "he did." He nodded, and then he walked away. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't enough. But it was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I'd ever gotten from him. And I'll be honest, it hit me harder than anything he'd said at Thanksgiving. Because cruelty from someone who doesn't love you is easy to dismiss. But a glimmer of understanding from someone who should have loved you better, that'll break you open in ways you didn't know you were closed. Derek and I don't talk much. He sends me a text on my birthday, just HBD, with a thumbs up emoji. I send him one on his. We're not enemies. We're just strangers who share DNA and a last name and 30-plus years of memories that we remember very differently. Vanessa called me in March to ask if she and Todd could borrow $15,000 for a business opportunity. I said no. She hasn't called since. I check her Instagram sometimes. The Tulum photos have stopped. The leased Mercedes is gone. They're driving a used Hyundai Tucson now. I hope they're paying off their debt. I genuinely hope they're finding their way. My mum calls me every Sunday at 6 p.m. We talk for exactly 22 minutes. I've timed it. Not out of resentment, but out of a kind of fond amusement. She tells me about her garden. I tell her about work. Neither of us mentions Thanksgiving. Neither of us mentions the folder. It's not perfect, but it's ours. And the house, Grandpa Earl's house, my house, stands on Pinecrest Drive the same way it has for over 4 decades. I replaced the roof last summer. I repainted the shutters the same shade of forest green that Grandma Louise picked out in 1987. I planted a dogwood tree in the front yard because Grandpa Earl always said he wanted one, but never got around to it. Sometimes, when I'm there checking on things or doing maintenance, I sit at his kitchen table and I can almost hear his voice. "Don't tell your father. He wouldn't understand." And then a chuckle, low and warm, like he knew exactly how this story would end. People ask me if I regret what happened at Thanksgiving. If I regret pulling out that folder, dropping the truth on the table like a bomb between the turkey and the cranberry sauce. And the answer is complicated because I don't regret the truth. I never will. But I grieve for what the truth cost me. I grieve for the family I wished I had. The father I deserved, the Thanksgivings that should have been celebrations instead of battlefields. But here's what I've learned. You can love people and still refuse to be their doormat. You can honor your grandfather's legacy and still set boundaries. You can be the quiet one, the invisible one, the one who sits in a dark room clicking buttons, and still be the one who holds all the cards. Because in the end, failure isn't about what you do for a living or how loud you are in a room. Failure is refusing to see the value in the people right in front of you. And by that measure, I was never the failure in this family. I never was.